Dale. It's been a minute since we've been together, and I'm so happy for you to join us here today. My name is Deb Pierce, and I will be your host for the next half an hour while we go through a very, very important topic to us LGBTQI seniors and folks that will be seniors eventually. We're going to talk about long-term care and aging in place. We've got two very special, very informed guests. Before we get to them, I just want to say that we hope that every time we've come into your home, this is episode 17 now, that every time that we've come into your home, we hope that you feel a little less isolated during these still challenging and changing times. I'd like to do a brief land acknowledgement as well before we get started. We wish to recognize the Indigenous nations of whose territory we are gathered today. The people of these nations have always been and will always be stewards of this land, and we thank them for the opportunity to be here today. If you've just joined us or you're watching us on YouTube, it's not too late to join our Facebook group, Rainbow Table. You can also go to our website, egal.ca/Rainbow Table to watch all of our past episodes. Again, reminding you that this is long-term care and home sharing, and we're going to get to our first, without further ado, we're going to get to our first guest. All right. Feel free to comment, say any questions, ask any questions. I will ask them live. And we've also set aside a few moments near the end to cover any questions that you might have during. And Jonathan's working feverishly in the background to vet those questions and let me know what we might be able to tackle in the next half an hour. Again, thank you for joining us today. All right, no stranger to EGAL. Our first guest is Celeste Pang. Celeste Pang uses she, they pronouns and is a senior research officer to LGBTQI health, aging, and housing at EGAL Canada. Celeste is a socio-cultural and medical anthropologist and qualitative researcher, and her research focuses on questions of aging, disability, gender, sexuality, and care. At EGAL, Celeste currently leads 2 national research studies, and I would like to bring my colleague and friend on right now. Celeste Pang, welcome to Rainbow Table.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Nice couch, Deb.
Thanks for being here. I know it's very consistent. I've actually moved since I started doing Rainbow Table, as you'd never know because it's the same. Thanks for noticing. In advance, I just want to share that Celeste has a brand new addition to your family, a little puppy. So if there's any puppy interruption, I actually welcome it. It may happen throughout, and that's okay. So thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
We've been doing so much work in your wheelhouse, being that we've been working with seniors. So it made perfect sense when we decided on this particular topic to have you as our one of 2 guests. So I'm just going to get right to it, if we could. So long-term care homes have come under the spotlight with COVID-19. So can you give us a definition of what a long-term care home is and who are the folks that live in them?
Absolutely. So long-term care homes are generally places where people who require certain levels of care might live. Interestingly, in Canada, this does differ across the country. So in Ontario, for example, like current eligibility criteria include, needing 24/7 access to nursing and personal care and frequent assistance with activities of daily living. So they are different from other types of homes that people might think of, like retirement homes or assisted living facilities. Interestingly, just for some general knowledge, they're not covered as part of the Canada Health Act. So healthcare aspects are subsidized, but people who live in them do pay for accommodations as well as uncovered services. And, folks at home, you can look up what that looks like in your province. But just as an example, in Ontario, to afford a shared room, you'd need about $2,000 a month. For accommodations, for a private room, about $2,700. So it is commonly thought of as a last stop option, but actually people from across socioeconomic classes live in them. And I think, Deb, you asked who lives in them, which is a very pertinent question.
Yes.
They are mainly older people, as may be assumed, also people living with disabilities. Often, government reports, sector reports focus on statistics, of, the rate of people with cognitive impairment, how many people have chronic conditions. I think it's really important to reorient our discussions and simply say people live in them, including older people, including to us LGBTQI people, which is the focus of our discussion today.
Right. And that brings me to my next question, which is what is a major issue when it comes to inclusion and affirmation in long-term care homes? Because I remember one of the first episodes we did last summer.
Yeah.
I did say, I don't want to, after being out and proud for so long and working in advocacy, that one of my biggest fears as I age, gracefully, is that I'm going to be forced to slow dance with Bob. And after a lifetime of that, of not doing that, it'll feel weird. So what is a major issue potentially, or issues, when it comes to inclusion and affirmation in long-term care?
Absolutely. So I think I'll point to one connected issue. So one major area that's come up in my research, including our current research at EGAL, is around gender and gender expression. So norms in long-term care are cis heteronormative. They do assume kind of a cisgender and heterosexual resident. They also assume a gender binary, which has particular implications for genderqueer, non-binary people, and fluidity around gender in general. I think linked to this issue is the question of workers and the structural organization of long-term care. So, for example, there are fears around people's gender expressions not being facilitated by what they want to wear, for example. These are fears that I've heard frequently, completely valid. At the same time, we need to think about, what is impeding this affirmation and facilitation. And if our frontline workers need to get 8 to 12 people to breakfast by 9 a.m., think about the number of people who may need facilitation, how much time that is, how much one person can do, and it raises different kinds of questions, perhaps about homophobia and transphobia, also about conditions of work, and the way that we structure our care and housing supports.
It's such important work, and I don't want to erase our seniors, and I know that culturally there can be a bit of that, in Canada, and so there's so many things to think about, because I think about my future, and I also think about the folks that have really paved the way for me as a very queer human. How they've marched on, and they've broken gender stereotypes, and they've done all those things, and then they just kind of go away, or they just become institutionalized, in a word. So and I'm sort of projecting my fears, but what are some of the common fears and misconceptions that we may, as a queer community, have about long-term care? I think you kind of tapped into those just now.
Yeah, absolutely. I would bridge back to what I just said. Like, one of the common fears, as you said, dancing with Bob, having to go back into the closet, if that means fears about disclosing identities, fears about having, people's families or close others recognized or not. These are fears that often get circulated in our popular media as well, to the extent that to us LGBTQI aging issues hit the media. These are very valid concerns, significant concerns, especially when people are bringing forward some really negative experiences of being pathologized and criminalized. And certainly our societies and systems have not fixed many of these issues. At the same time, to reiterate what I just said, I think it's really important to be looking at the structural and systemic questions around health and housing. Sometimes these fears can get displaced onto care workers, many who are racialized, immigrants, newcomers. And, out of fear, some blame may be placed on them. My research has shown, and other research has shown, again, that it is really critical to be looking at the bigger picture instead and finding points in common.
So do we have resources, and do folks that run long-term care, whether they're privatized or run otherwise,
Yeah.
Is it your job or your position or your dream to have
Mhm.
folks consult with you and a gal and our upcoming guest? Um, is it like, how do folks, when you know better, you do better? So when there are forms for long-term care where it might say gender MF, spouse MF, so very, very gender binaries, are there ways that sort of we're reaching out to folks running these, or can we offer them, diversity and inclusion training? What can we do to make them do better?
Absolutely. So I think we would define the we. I think one thing is absolutely education and training, if that doesn't replace the broader picture. There has been research showing that there's a great thirst for education among care workers. They don't necessarily get those opportunities. So there's definitely need and space there. Further to that, I think as individuals, especially in a meanwhile or in the shorter term, just show up. Think about who you know who lives in a long-term care home and be there. Spend time with them. Facilitate access to queer content, if that's bringing in books, bringing in movies, sharing some gossip. I think sometimes we can forget that older people and people living with disabilities who happen to live in a long-term care home continue to be people with needs and desires. And, there's some kind of, the door becomes quite literal from what I found and experienced. And there seems to be something in the community in general that there's some kind of inhibition or perhaps some hidden ageism or ableism to continuing to connect with our community members in long-term care. So in a really day-to-day basis, I would say simply show up, continue to reflect, continue to educate yourself, and continue to think about the future, including your own future, hopefully.
Right. Great answer. Thank you. Before we get to our next guest, and then I'm going to bring you back, Celeste, we do have a community question
Yeah.
that I'd love to pose to you. So Lisa writes in, is there an initiative to create, in their acronym, LGBTQ / long-term care? That's been my dream, to create
Great question.
great. I really want to do this. Like, I wish I had more money. I would create a franchise of queer long-term care. Anyway, is there an initiative to do that?
So I could talk forever about this. I've done some archival research. There have been initiatives since the 80s that have started and then failed. There are differing community opinions about whether or not there should be a specific facility, floor, or wing. Some people want it, some people don't. There are currently some housing and care initiatives in the US. To my knowledge, there's nothing imminent or super well organized in Canada. So definitely potential from what I've heard, but nothing that I know of.
Consider me in if there is. And Bruce writes in from Fondation Emergence, Aging Great. Oh yeah, your Aging Gayfully program is an excellent resource on sensitization about senior in their acronym LGBTQ issues. Hey, Bruce.
Hi, Bruce.
Great partner to a gal too. Lisa, we have to get this happening. Lisa, from your lips, I swear this is really like, I have a couple of different legacies in my own mind of what I'm with, and one of them is to do that. So between you, Celeste, and I, and maybe some of the viewers here, we can get on that. Celeste, thank you so much for being here today. We're going to put you back in the green room, and I'm going to bring our next guest out, and then the two of you can come back with me to wrap up in about 10 minutes. Okay. Great participation. Thank you. Keep your questions and comments coming. That's great. I'll see them pop up on the screen, and I'll read them with your name unless you wish to remain anonymous. If you're just tuning in, thank you for joining Rainbow Table today. I am your host, Deb Pierce, and we will be talking about we just talked about long-term care facilities. Now we're going to talk about something, it's a very like 80s term about aging in place. So we're going to talk to Jackie Tanner, who has got a couple of letters after her name, MSWRSW. She's the National Manager and Clinical Lead at Canada Home Share. So Jackie is an experienced clinical social worker specializing in working with older adults and their families. Jackie's clinical focus is social isolation and aging in place. Let's bring Jackie Tanner into the conversation. Welcome, Jackie.
Hi, Deb.
Hello. Thank you for sitting in the green room so quietly. It's already a great conversation, and we have some wonderful audience engagement. So be prepared. You could be thrown a curveball of a question. I hope you are. Jackie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Deb.
It's absolutely my pleasure. We were talking beforehand. I'm super jazzed about the concept of about what you're doing. So before we get further, can you explain to our audience what Canada Home Share is and what you do?
Sure. So Canada Home Share is an intergenerational housing initiative. So we seek to address social isolation and foster aging in place for older adults while providing affordable, safe housing close to campus and addressing the rental crisis faced by students simultaneously. So what we do at Home Share is we facilitate the whole process. So the social workers screen and interview, move on to the matching process, and then case manage all of our matches for the duration.
That's awesome. What a concept. And so can you talk about, I mentioned aging in place. It does feel like a very 80s term, but it seems to have caught. And so what might be the benefits and who would qualify for this type of program with Canada Home Share?
Yeah, so from the research that we've done, Home Share is run by the National Initiative for the Care of the Elderly. So a lot of research went into the planning and implementation of this program. So not surprisingly, 95% of the older adults that we found in our research wanted to age in their own home, in their own community where they're connected. And so the extra income and the practical assistance around the home that they can get from participating in a program like this assists them in remaining more comfortably aging in place in their own home.
And so what would that sort of intake, if you will, it feels like a dating app for living together.
It kind of is, but it's facilitated it's facilitated by a social worker. So if you wanted to look into participating, there's an online application on our website, which I believe you're going to put up after. Then there's an interview, a virtual interview with a social worker. There's everybody in Home Share must have a past of vulnerable sector screening police check and a personal reference check. Once those things are out of the way, we move on to matching. So our lovely team of social workers, they look at the applications, all of the screening and interviewing data that they've got, and they make some clinical decisions about who might work best with who. And then you're introduced to your potential match in a Google meeting with the social worker. And if that goes well, then a tour of the home, and then an in-depth home share agreement if the match wants to move forward and live together.
And so how long do these, are they short-term, long-term, indefinite? Can it go like sort of on a 6-month, 8-month, 12-month basis? How does that work?
So home share matches are like snowflakes to me. They're all different. So it depends on what the match wants. So some students and home providers looking for a 4-month match. Most of our matches are a school year. So 8 months is generally the case. But I've had matches on my caseload that have been living together for a couple of years or more. So if they like each other, why switch?
Right. Well, and so what is the dynamic and what might the expectations be? Because I think about somebody, say, in their mid-80s, they're not ready necessarily, or they don't feel like they're ready for a long-term care facility, but they might be a little bit lonely and not as self-sufficient. So is there an expectation in as much as roommates might be like, you're making dinner, you're doing the dishes, you're kind of doing that? Or is it autonomous and they just simply live under the same roof? Or is that up to the two of them?
Yeah, it is up to the two. So the student the expectation on the part of the student is 5 to 7 hours per week of assistance around the home or companionship. So that can look like assisting with getting groceries, maybe some cleaning, snow maintenance, lawn maintenance, things like that make it easier for the older adult to thrive in their own home. And that is all written into the home share agreement. So every match doesn't have the same things in their agreement. It depends on what the student's willing to do and what the home provider is looking for. And on the part of the home provider, it's not like homestay where the home provider is expected to in any way take care of the student. The student is expected to, for subsidized rent, give back to the older adult home provider.
And I trust that if there's any communication issues, you would be sort of you say social worker often in this. So it really is coming from a clinical perspective. It's not just a business model. It's very much being nurtured and people's needs are being looked after.
So we also provide mediation support. So sometimes when a match moves in, things come up that might not have been written into the home share agreement. We learn more about each other. That social worker is your social worker for the duration of your match. So the home share agreement can be amended, maybe things added, things taken away, things that we've learned. We also offer an on-call support line, which is me at the other end of it since COVID started. Every weekday, I answer the phone from 7 to 9 p.m. If there's any questions or concerns. It's a very unbusy phone line, but we are there to support for the duration.
That's great to know. And let's hope that maybe it gets a little bit busier because folks are going to, pass this information on. We just heard from a viewer, Sherry. Thank you very much, or Shari. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I've been involved with developing Home Share Newfoundland. So I guess you can, we match seniors with university students. And Chicago has the first Halton Home Share program. Huh. Well, thanks for letting us know about that. That's fantastic. Yeah, we will be putting this in the comments, but Home Share is across Canada, and there are some information sharing sessions. Now, are your information sharing sessions in September, are they in person or are they online right now?
No, so we're keeping everything virtual for the time being. So right now, Home Share, Canada Home Share began as Toronto Home Share in 2018. We've expanded and just launched our first expansion sites in Metro Vancouver, Peel Region, and Kingston. The next set will likely be launched in early 2022. So all of our information sessions are virtual. And even if you're not interested in maybe one of those sites, but you're from and just want information, those information sessions will expand on the information about applying and what to expect if you were interested.
So one last question, because this is Rainbow Table, how do we queer home share? How do we ensure that there is sort of that queer aspect and that safer space for checking that potential box or identity or non-gender binary? What does Canada Home Share do to help with that?
Yeah, so in place of a checkbox, we have a large field where you can describe anything you want us to know about yourself. And we would use that as a safety protocol for matching moving forward. So anything that we can do to make our participants feel more safe, I'm always open to suggestions. And I'm very excited about being involved in Rainbow Table because queering home share is something that I'm very passionate about.
Excellent, excellent. So that I could have led with that one, but I wanted to sort of talk about all the amazing pros of it. And then obviously it's a safer space and an inclusive space, which is something that Celeste and I were talking about a little bit earlier. Thank you very much for talking about Canada Home Share. We're going to keep those links up. And then when we repost this, when it's not live, we will have all of those places for folks to be able to click on and check out those information sharing sessions. We have a few moments left. We're going to bring Celeste Pang back on so that the three of us can have a quick chat and wrap things up. Let's see what Celeste is doing with their puppy right now. Yes!
On request only.
I love it. I love it. What is your puppy's name?
Tinto. It means little cup of coffee in Spanish.
That is delicious.
My little cup.
I would never get anything done.
Cameo.
I love that Celeste is still focusing on the camera, but the dog is a little bit over this way. But if I'm still doing this, I'm still engaged. You know what? We're all working from home these days. If people can't get with that, I don't know what to tell you. So we do have a couple of moments. If somebody wants to quickly type in, if you have any questions about long-term care, about Canada Home Share, about anything really about our queer communities, going into these type of living situations, or in some cases, some facilities. We have a few moments to talk about it. I think it's really important to have this conversation because while while we might be sort of, and I'm closer to it than the two of you, but while we don't really live in that bubble, right? We don't really necessarily think about that planning or those safer spaces. We might have parents or guardians or grandparents that are in that situation. So we don't really think about this until it happens, right? Some of us aren't great future planners. And so I love having this conversation now because God willing, we'll all be there someday. We do have a comment I see here. Jonathan, I don't know if you're going to put it up on screen, but we did hear from Lisa again, just saying that was great. So not so much as of a question. Oh, William says, how does LGBTQ factor into the home share program? So that might have been asked before we kind of got into it, but if you just want to reiterate that for William, Jackie, that'd be great.
Sure. So there's an opportunity to tell your home share social worker anything that you would find relevant for making you feel safe within a match. So, and same for whether you're a home provider or a student. And we really use that information that you share to find a match that's going to be safe and supportive for everyone.
Excellent. Well, we have just about come to the end of our time, so I'm going to give both of you an opportunity if you want to sort of wrap up on how we can know better and do better, something that we can maybe take away and think about. I'll leave it to you, Celeste, to do a wrap up for a minute or two.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I'd encourage everyone to not only read the news, but also do some digger, oh my goodness, deeper dive into what home care options are, what long-term care options are, and to really think about what your own needs, desires, wants are, and to look at the current landscape. And maybe we can find some more ways to think together about what we need to make for the future, and have some more viable and flourishing options for our communities as we all age.
Yeah, I think I would be remiss if I didn't share, and thank you for that, Celeste. I would be remiss if I didn't share that long-term care facilities have, to say the least, been under the microscope over the last while during the pandemic, and shamefully so in some cases. So it's great to have this, and thank you so much for your current and continued hard work in this field, because we need folks like you making these changes. So thank you. Before we get to you, Jackie, thank you also. An important documentary is Gen Silent, about the discrimination of seniors. And we will put that up there in the link as well. Have either of you seen that?
I have.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that what you sent me, Celeste, and there was only like 30 seconds of it? You sent me something.
Oh, I sent you a wonderful clip by one of our local folks called Older Than What?
Aha. Right. Relativity. Before we get to you again, Jackie, now we're getting folks that are highly communicative, and I'm loving it. I'm not proofreading it before, so let's just fingers crossed. Michelle says the Ontario Centres for Learning, Research and Innovation
Yes.
in Long-Term Care have developed some support for LTC homes in supporting 2S LGBTQI communities. We will put that link there. You nodded in agreement there, Celeste?
Yes, and also we are supporting the HSO services standards effort. So I think Jonathan's also going to pop into the chat the opportunity for individuals to provide feedback for that initiative.
Excellent. All right. And we just put that up there. So thank you very much. All of these will remain in the link. So if you're just joining us, or you're not wanting to comfortably leave this URL to go somewhere else, just stick around. Jackie, the final words to you, Jackie Tanner from Canada Home Share. Go ahead.
Sure. I would say my final words are, if you're considering home share, you're probably maybe feeling anxiety. And I would say, talk to us about that anxiety. We know you've got questions, we've got answers. Home share can be a wonderful experience that is driven by you, what you want, what would help you. So I think there is a hesitation sometimes. I don't know how I'm going to feel about having a stranger living with me, or how I'm going to feel living with a stranger, but we'll make sure that you're not. It won't feel like living with a stranger. So I just want to say that. I think it's normal to have a bit of anxiety when thinking about making a change like this.
Yeah, because your home can be super sacred, right? I mean, maybe you've got 50 years of memories with a partner that may no longer be around? And do I come into that space? Am I okay opening that space to a younger person?
Exactly.
But I have to say that the pros would far outweigh the cons, because loneliness is exacerbated in this pandemic specifically, and for folks that are of advanced age. So
Yeah.
thanks to both of you for being on today. Thanks to everybody for chiming in. Your comments and kudos are fantastic. It is an important discussion to talk about, aging in place or long-term care facilities, and how do we queer them? How do we get a tea dance into a Sunday afternoon at a long-term care facility? That's my question to you. How do we get drag queens entertaining after bingo? I'm just saying, I'm putting these feelers out there. All right, we're going to wrap up this episode 17 of A Rainbow Table. Thank you very much. Again, if you want to see previous episodes, we've talked about sex and health. We've talked about religion and its role in to us LGBTQI seniors and the community as a whole. Lots of things to check out there on egal.ca/rainbow table. If you haven't joined our Facebook group, please do so. Share it with your friends. The more the merrier. There are daily conversations and coffee groups and questions and networking on our Facebook group all the time. And as I like to say, at the end of every single rainbow table, there's always a seat for you at our rainbow table. Take care of yourself and have a great day.